Hello and welcome to Last Call right here on UINDY TV. It's another Monday night, which means we're talking sports. It's Graham Scher, that's Caden Colford, and our guest today, we have Chuck Foster. We're going to have him on for a couple different segments today. We haven't had Chuck in a couple weeks, but guys, let's get right into it. Week 11 of the NFL season, and a bunch of good games again, as per usual, but we'll start. The Colts were on a bye this week, so we'll start in Chicago. The Bears went over to Detroit, and an NFC East matchup there, and it ended up being a good one. Justin Fields back. He played pretty well. He had the Bears with a good shot there towards the end, Caden.
Yeah, and it's surprising because you go into Detroit, which is one of the harder places to play in the NFL, and they gave the Lions a game, and really it looks like the Lions are going to run away with the division.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the game, and I remember I checked in on the score, and I was like, wait, the Bears are up?
Right.
I mean, the Lions are coming in, they're the favorites to take the North, and they've been phenomenal this season.
You see their record, Chicago, 3-7 on the year to 7-2 for the Detroit Lions, and the Bears had the lead going into the fourth quarter after you see Justin Fields step up in the pocket and fire this 40-yard touchdown pass to DJ Moore. Justin Fields looked pretty impressive. He was out with that injury for a few weeks, but he came back and he had the Bears cooking there late in the game. It took a very late effort from Detroit. You saw one of the touchdown passes here. Now this one in the final minute of the game, Detroit ends up escaping with the victory.
And Jared Goff, he struggled in the game, or 3 picks in the game, but veteran quarterbacks make veteran plays. He didn't let that get to him. In the fourth, he played a pretty solid quarter, and he was able to bring that team back from the mud to take out the Bears.
I think that's uncharacteristic of Jared Goff at this point. I mean, the guy's consistent, and that's his calling card. He's consistent. He's not going to throw for 500, break out for 450 like Pat Mahomes in any given week, but the guy's got a consistent 250, and that's why Detroit keeps rolling.
And you talk about the best teams in the NFC. Detroit absolutely is one of them, and they just continue to get things done. And they were behind by 2 scores there late in the fourth, and they got it done in the end. Detroit has a great team. How do you see them sizing it up with some of the other best teams like the Eagles, like the 49ers in the NFC, Chuck?
I mean, this is one of those teams that they're scary because they can take any team in a very close game because they're not the most talented team out of all the top teams in the NFC, but they're a group of well-coached guys that all have one goal, and that's one of the better things you can ask for.
Yeah, they're well-coached. Dan Campbell has just completely flipped the culture around in Detroit, and while they may not have the most star-studded roster, they have a system that works on both sides, and I think Dan Campbell put it, you can knock us down, we're going to get up and we're going to punch you in the face. You can break both of our legs, we'll just knock you down, and you'll be on the ground with us. They can take it into the fourth quarter and play these nitty-gritty matches with the Eagles or the 49ers, but for them, you just have to get to that fourth quarter. That's the challenge.
Let's move on to the AFC. The Cincinnati Bengals were in Baltimore to take on the Ravens. This one was a Thursday night football matchup, and we'll look at the highlights here. Gus Edwards had a couple rushing touchdowns in this game, and the Ravens, who came in 7-3, just dominated the Bengals, I should say, for the duration of the game. This was a scary moment there in the second quarter as Joe Burrow had a hand injury. And guys, Chuck, actually, I'll let you tell the audience what happened to Burrow.
So looking at it, we saw that it was a wrist injury, so he will be out for the season is from what we're hearing. And I mean, if you're in the Bengals' shoes, this is tragic because, you just paid the man, and now you're going to have to go with a backup for the rest of the season, and they've already been kind of on the cusp of a playoff spot. So it'll be interesting to see if they can come back, fight the way out. Yeah,
I mean, the way they were playing, the way they were, pushing through the season, playoff spot was a minimum for this team, right? I think it's going to be like that whenever Joe Burrow is your quarterback, but to see him go, now you're kind of at the level. Do we push on to the playoffs? Do we still give it a shot? Because I mean, you could find that wild card spot, but then that takes you out of the draft consideration, or at least getting a good pick next year. So that's a decision for that front office to make.
Cincinnati definitely takes a huge blow there. They fall to 5-5 on the season, whereas the Baltimore Ravens move to 8-3. They continue to roll, one of the best teams in the AFC. Let's move on now and talk another matchup, same conference, the other 2 opponents, the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll look at the highlights now. This one went down to the wire as well.
And yeah, I mean, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, it was his first official start as a quarterback, and he played very well. I mean, it wasn't anything super special, but he got the job done, especially going 4 for 4 to end off the game, to give them that game-winning field goal opportunity.
And a lot of times on the show, we talk about the Colts, we talk about playing a role, and that's exactly what Thompson Robinson did in this one. He didn't need to go out there and be Deshaun Watson. He needed to go out there and make smart passes, complete those smart passes. Then you're playing against Cleveland, you're playing against Pittsburgh, who's kind of in that same boat offensively, where you're not going to see a high-scoring game out of either of these teams, and that 13-10 was really just a duking out on defense.
Two conference teams, and the Browns, you see this field goal in the final seconds, they end up coming out on top. Browns, they continue to get things done. That that division actually, should say, they just keep winning. The Ravens, they're up to 8-3 now. The Browns are up to 7-3. Of course, they already had their bye. Steelers are 6-5 now, 6-4, I should say. So a bunch of winning records in that one division. It'll be interesting to see how the final 7 or so weeks of the season close out. Let's go back to the NFC now, and we'll talk Seattle Seahawks. They were in Los Angeles for the LA Rams, and the Seahawks, this one went down to the wire, a 1-point finish. We'll duke out the highlights here before we tell you who the winner was, but Seattle, who scored the first 10 points of the game, you can see it. They were rolling early, and they kind of hit the wall.
And that's kind of what I expected out of the Seattle team. They've been hot as of late, unexpectedly, and then obviously LA loses a huge guy in Cooper Kupp. And just to see him go down, you would think LA would fold, but hey, some different ideas out of that Los Angeles camp.
The Rams, they came in. They're normally a passing offense. Matt Stafford's coming back. You can see that they kind of slowed down the offense, let the run game go. Darrell Henderson had a touchdown, and Royce Freeman played a pretty good game. The Rams were a lot slower, and I feel like that worked against a team like the Seahawks.
Seattle, see a nice completed pass down the field there. They went on a nice little drive there towards the end, and they end up winning the ball game. 17-16 was the final part. And that was actually the Rams who beat the Seahawks 17-16. Sorry about that. So the Rams continue to win. They're looking pretty strong here. They went to the Super Bowl. And then last year they kind of fell apart. They didn't have they didn't have Kupp, and this year they're starting to get those winning efforts back under their feet. Chuck, how far do you see them going in the NFC?
I feel like when it comes to the NFC, I mean, the Rams are kind of that middle of the pack, and you're in a group with the 49ers and the Seahawks. It's going to be kind of hard for this team to actually make a playoff push, but they are dangerous. They do have weapons. They just need to kind of round it out.
And I'll add on to that. They're dangerous when everybody's, actually playing, when everyone's healthy. You have Matthew Stafford, who's getting up there in age, who's seems like he tweaks something every other game. And then now Cooper Kupp, it's sad to see him starting to fall into that habit we see some guys do of like a constant injury cycle, but hope he comes back strong. And like you said, Chuck, when all the pieces are together, this team can be dangerous.
Let's go ahead and take a quick break. Chuck is going to leave for now. Thank you, Chuck, for your NFL analysis, but he'll be back in a couple segments to talk some NBA. So when we come back, we will tell you what's going on with Last Call's Game of the Week, and we'll look at the Super Bowl rematch that's going on tonight. And later, we'll also talk what's going on with UINDY Athletics. Everything and more coming up on Last Call. See ya.
We'll leave it to our actual athletes. Watch UINDY TV's live sports broadcast on GLVCSN and YouTube.
The first time I went to Lucas Oil was last year for the 6A Center Grove versus Carroll State high school football game. And I walk in this time thinking I know what's going on, thinking I know what's going to happen. And if I were to say that Lucas Oil lost any effect on you, just the pure vastness that it hits you when you walk in, I'd be wrong. And Jace put it perfectly. He walked in and said, wow, this is the dream. And it is, because the people that we look up to listen to a high school football game of the week on WICR HD3 UINDY Radio.
Welcome back, guys. And now we're going to talk last call's game of the week in the NFL. This one was a barn burner. It went down to the wire. This one was Sunday Night Football in the Mile High City. The Minnesota Vikings were in Denver to take on the Broncos, Caden. And let's take a look at the highlights now. Minnesota, they had won 6 straight coming into today. They had moved to 6-4. They had looked strong, and both of us had actually picked it on our games last week on Monday Football Forecast.
Yeah, this guy right here, Josh Dobbs, he takes the hits. He had turned himself into primetime TV, but then he gets on primetime, and it was really just turnovers that, just hit this team in the backside time and time and time again. Yeah,
he threw 1 interception. You saw one of the 2 fumbles that he had in the game. This was one of the brighter moments for him, though. Scrambles and makes a nice touchdown pass. The Vikings, you see them going into halftime, they had the lead, and Dobbs would end up rushing for a touchdown on this drive. So Minnesota did look pretty strong there going into late in the 3rd and early 4th, but there's another fumble. Madison, this time Alexander Madison loses it. More just turnovers. The Vikings just could not keep the ball in their hands all night long, and a big credit to the Denver defense.
And yeah, this team, like the Browns that we were talking about earlier, really built on their defense. You watch these highlights and you'll see that Denver score just tick up by three, time and time again. And that shows me, well, their offense may not be clicking on all cylinders, but the defense is there, and the defense keeps them in this game, leads them all the way to the 4th quarter.
You just saw a really impressive catch by Cortland Sutton in the back of the end zone. That would be the game-deciding play. That gave the Broncos the lead by a point. They went for 2 and didn't get it, so that 1-point game could have been even just a couple more. But last call's game of the week ended up being a good one. And the Broncos, who last week they beat the Bills, they go back home. They beat the Vikings now. They've beat a couple worthy opponents. Yeah. The Broncos are now 5-5, and look out.
I had to look myself in the mirror today and say, you were wrong about the Broncos 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, last week, and this week. I think that we have to turn our opinions around looking at the Broncos, right? Because the resume is starting to build up. These are good teams. The Chiefs, the Bills, the Vikings, who are the hottest team in all of football. Watch out. Here comes Denver.
Yeah, Denver. They started the year 1-5, if I'm not mistaken, and now they've routed off a few straight. They are definitely getting to be one of the hottest teams in football right now. So let's now look at the rest of the NFL scores from yesterday. We talked quite a few games, and last call's game of the week, the Vikings and the Broncos on Sunday Night Football. And another good game we hadn't mentioned, the Green Bay Packers hosted the Los Angeles Chargers, and boy, the Chargers, they just cannot get anything going this year. No rhythm, it seems like, for Justin Herbert and company. 23-20, the Packers improved to 4-6 on the year. The Dolphins, off of their bye, they moved to 7-3 on the year after beating the Las Vegas Raiders 20-13 down in Miami. And then the New York Giants, they go into Washington and knock off the NFC East opponent, the Commanders. So the Giants improved to 3-8 on the year. That was one I thought that the Commanders were definitely going to come out on top of.
We were both wrong on that one, too.
Yeah. We were wrong on a lot of games this week, it seemed like.
Yeah, it seems like it, but we got a couple more weeks coming up.
Yeah. Dallas, they go into Carolina. Carolina, who's only won 1 game this year. They're 1-9 now. They got blown out by Dallas 33-10. Jacksonville, they host the Tennessee Titans, and Trevor Lawrence looked more like his old Clemson self. The Prince threw for 2 touchdowns and rushed for another 2, and 34-14 the final in Jacksonville.
And also, I checked my fantasy, and wide receiver over there, Calvin Ridley, had a 30 bomb in terms of fantasy points, and that's something that could really open up the Jags offense. If they start seeing their guy who was supposed to be the number 1 receiver probably in the division, let alone the Jaguars, if he starts coming alive like he did last game, Jaguars can be something sweet.
Couple more games to talk about. Arizona in Houston to take on the Texans. And C.J. Stroud, who has been electric the last couple of weeks, he threw 3 interceptions. The Houston Texans ended up winning, so they go to 6-4 on the year. But a close win there. Kyler Murray drops it in 21-16, the final down in Houston. The 49ers stay hot. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 27-14, and now Tampa Bay will come to Indianapolis for the Colts. And the Buffalo Bills get back in the winner's circle. 32-6, the final. They beat the New York Jets. So those are the rest of the NFL scores from yesterday. Let's look ahead to tonight. And a Super Bowl 57 rematch from this past season. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm really looking forward to this, Caden.
Yeah, they're two elite teams, and they're two teams that have proven time and time again they're going to give us a game every time that they play. So many stars on both sides, and both of these teams play a fun brand of football. It's not exactly smash mouth, running through the A-gap, play after play after play. These teams are going to chuck it down the field. We're going to see some highlights come out of this one.
In Super Bowl 57, the Chiefs got it done 38-35 against Philadelphia, but Philadelphia looked really, really great in that one. And Jalen Hurts rushed for 3 touchdowns, threw for another. He had over 300 yards in that one. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown both went off in the Super Bowl, and still Patrick Mahomes gets another ring on his finger. The Chiefs ended up coming back, beating the Eagles 38-35. Should be a fun matchup. Caden, pick your winner and your final score.
I think the Eagles this season are just a more complete team on both sides of the ball, starting around their offensive line. Everything's built off that, led by Jason Kelce. Run game's there, passing game's there, the defense is there. Obviously, the defense is playing probably one of the best offenses football's ever seen, but Eagles take this one.
I think the Eagles get it done as well. I think you have to have a monster game from Travis Kelce for any sort of life for Kansas City. If Kelce does have a monster game, and I'm talking like 135 yards receiving, couple touchdowns. Okay. Patrick Mahomes has to have a rushing touchdown. If the Chiefs do what we know they can do, I think the Chiefs can get it done. But if I had to bet my money, I would bet on the Eagles. I think Philadelphia gets this one done. Let's move on and talk some UINDY sports. Caden, a fun matchup over the weekend. You were in Kansas for this call. It was the Indianapolis Greyhounds football team and the Pittsburgh State Gorillas. Tell me a little bit about this matchup.
You know, Pitt State, it's a very, very different environment. We're all at the Division II level, but you're going through this cornfield, through the middle of nowhere, and then all of a sudden there's this huge 3-story stadium with a huge press box, the suites. This looks like a Division I, if not professional programs, playing grounds, and the Gorillas, the whole community there, that's what it's all about, is the Pitt State Gorillas. In our hotel, Jace Hodge and I woke up. We saw red and yellow all over the halls. You went around town, there's Gorillas parked at each corner in front of every building. This team loves their Gorillas. They love Gorilla football, and they come out, they fill this huge stadium up. And for UINDY, they have to go into a hostile environment, probably the hardest place they've played at all year, or in the past 10 years. They've had to go there twice in the past 2. And you come out and you play a very, very strong first half, going in 7-8, give up a safety, you throw a couple turnovers, but you're still in the game. Second half, the Gorillas come out and they show why they're one of the best teams in Division II football. They just kind of put the gas pedal down. It was hard to look back from there for them.
Yeah, you talk about the fans. It sounds like they just bleed Gorilla red and yellow over there in Kansas. Pitt State, they move on in the NCAA tournament. The Greyhounds, unfortunately for them, their season is over. They had only lost 1 game going into the NCAA tournament, but this was their second loss on the season, so they finished the year 9-2. Let's talk some UINDY swim and dive. The UINDY men's and women's swimming and diving teams both earned convincing wins versus nationally ranked Carson Newman over the weekend. The UINDY men outpaced the Eagles 2290.5 to 736.5, and they retained the number 1 spot, while the women won 1809.5 to 1069.5 at the 4-session 40 event dual meet. An astonishing 10 pool records were set by the UINDY swimmers over the weekend, half of which were set by junior alone Cedric Busing. On deck for UINDY is the Denison Invitational in Granville, Ohio on November 29th through December 2nd.
The UINDY men's soccer team advanced to the 3rd round of the NCAA championship tournament after defeating Lake Erie 1-0. The first half was back and forth between the two teams. UINDY and Lake Erie had a relatively equal share of the ball. Then the Hounds pulled away when the only goal of the contest was scored by Bobby Turner in the 75th minute of the match. With higher seeded Tiffin and Illinois Springfield losing their second round matches this weekend, UIndy is on track to host the quarterfinals the weekend of December 1st through the 3rd. The Greyhounds will square off with Lewis.
Now we also have one more sporting event to talk about. Let's talk some UIndy basketball. So Caden, you and I have both called a few games now for men's and women's. We'll start with men's though. They came into the year ranked number 5 in all of D2, all of Division II in the NCAA. They lost their first game. They did win their second, but now they've dropped their first 2 home games of the year, and they sit at 1-3. They have not came out so far this season like they did last year.
You know, I hate to compare these two divisions of basketball, right?
Sure.
But I see this UIndy team and I think of the Nets, you know, when you throw James Harden and Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving all in the same squad, and we're bringing in pieces like Zelinskis and Zool, some guys that, you know, are the head of their teams coming into UIndy, and we've heard Coach Corsaro talking about where the shot's going to come from. And we also have guys like David Ejai stepping into a bigger role while we have the returning National Player of the Year in Kenny Ochoa and an All-American in Jesse Bingham. So the ball has a lot of hands to find, and I think it's hard for this team to find where their shots are going to come from. You know, find that rhythm on offense. There isn't really a flow as of yet, and I think when it gels, this is the top team in the country, but we just aren't there yet.
Yeah, the Greyhounds, it's definitely ill to say that they can't get things together, but the chemistry just doesn't seem right so far, 4 games into the year. So I'm definitely interested to see if they can kind of mesh a little bit better together, find their chemistry, find their offense a bit more, and start playing that Greyhound defense that we saw so much last year. Let's go ahead and take a quick, let's talk UIndy women's basketball. I almost forgot. They've looked pretty good. They lost their first 2 games of the year, but they then got a win against St. Mary of the Woods. They moved to 1-2 on the year, and a feisty club that Mark Mitchell has. I
think feisty would be the use. I don't know if you'd say feisty, probably say tough, but that's a good word to describe this team with, because they went to St. Mary of the Woods, and we saw Liv Becker come out. I'm pretty sure she started 8 for 8 from the field. Yeah. She was ripping the nylon from everywhere she was. She was looking for her shot, which is something that we haven't really seen from her in her first 2 years of playing at UIndy. So now that she starts looking for her shot, that kind of opens up the dimension of this offense, because now with some people you're bringing in, you have shooters all around the arc. And speaking of that, Jada Patton took a 3, and I think she might be the one person on the squad Mark Mitchell does never want to see pull the ball from the 3-point line. But you have shooters built around her. They have great high to low post play, and this team only goes up from here.
Greyhounds, the women Greyhounds, they're 3 games in. They haven't played a home game yet. That first one will be tomorrow. 5:30 tip-off. You can catch all the action right here on UIndy TV, and check out the GLVC Sports Network. That's where you can watch the ball game. So let's go ahead and take a quick break, though. When we come back, Chuck Foster rejoins us, and we'll talk the Indiana Pacers and what's going on lately in the NBA. Plus, later, don't miss Caden and I's picks on Monday football forecast at the end of the show. It's last call.
Are you feeling alone in your faith? UIndy Catholic gives you an opportunity to get involved in a religious community on campus, providing sacramental needs and fellowship for prospective students and giving you a sense of belonging.
We just want you guys to know that God loves you, He delights in you, and He's in awe of you, and we would love to meet you. So you should come on out.
UIndy Catholic, a community for you.
For children who may have high-functioning autism, may have ADHD, processing challenges, working memory issues, sensory integration issues, those types of challenges. It's a place where human beings are valued, children are respected. It's a progressive school that takes a hands-on approach to education.
Back on Last Call, Chuck Foster rejoins us. Guys, let's move and talk on to the NBA here. The Indiana Pacers, who had started the year red hot. Last night they fell to the Orlando Magic, who are red hot themselves. Chuck, what'd you see in this game?
I mean, yeah, that was a tough game for them to lose. You know, Tyrese Halliburton struggled only having 12 points, and Paolo Banchero played phenomenal. So it was just one of those games where it's not your night, and that's just what it looked like for the Pacers there.
This team is a team that lives and dies by its offense, and that can be a great thing when the shots are falling. Going to be a terrible thing when you have a night like tonight when the shooters aren't hitting and the post game just isn't there. This team, if it wants to be successful heading in later into the season, the defense needs to upgrade. That's the bottom line. The defense is not where it needs to be. Of course, you have Tyrese Halliburton putting up MVP numbers on the offensive end, but he has zero help on the defensive end, and that's where this team just falls short.
Yeah, you talk about the defense. That's obviously where the Pacers need to step up, because when those shots aren't falling on a night like this, defense is what wins you games. Pacers, they fall to the Magic last night. 128-116 was the final score. But they have a couple of easy games coming up here, what on paper looks like it might be a couple of easy matchups for Indiana. How do you see them closing out the month of November here?
I mean, the biggest thing is you can't get too comfortable, because coming into this game, I would have probably said that the Magic would have been an easier game, you know, but Banchero found a matchup that he liked and was eating in the paint the entire game. So it's a matchup game, especially for the Pacers, who aren't the best team. They're just an offensive team. So it'll be interesting to see how they match up against these teams.
And I wouldn't mind seeing some zones thrown in there, in all honesty. I mean, seeing some different matchups, switching it up some different looks. Obviously, I've seen them running a 3-2 at times. They'll hop back into it for 2 or 3 plays and hop back into man. But when it comes down in those crunch time situations, our matchups are just getting exploited over and over again.
The elsewhere in the East, the 76ers, they keep on winning. They're 10-3 now on the year. They're up to 10-3, 121-99 last night against the Brooklyn Nets, and also the Celtics now atop the East again. They got it done yesterday in Memphis, 102-100, a 2-point victory for Boston. Boston has the most wins in the NBA at 11. But when we look at the East here, guys, it looks like those top 10 teams might end up being the 10 teams that make the playoffs. If we look at the 5 teams on the bottom, Chuck, do you see anybody there that you think just started out the season on a low note and can make a run at one of the playoff spots later on?
I mean, yeah, I'd say Toronto. I mean, they're at 11,
Toronto.
so they're not that far out. But, I mean, that's a team. They're still talented despite being at the bottom right now. So it's just for them, they really just got to figure it all out, put their pieces together. I think they can come back up.
Personally, I'm a little disappointed in the Chicago Bulls, right? Because you have names like Zach LaVine, you have names like DeMar DeRozan, who a couple of years ago in the league are tearing it up, and you bring these guys together. Of course, you have Vooch in there at the center spot, who had great sense with the Magic. You just expected more out of this squad. It's not like they've had a terrible draft picks for the last 5 years. I mean, they've been okay at building the roster. It's just time for that roster to start executing, start providing for the squad.
One thing that's really surprised me about the East, you see the Orlando Magic, they beat the Pacers, but they're up to number 5 now in the Eastern Conference. They're up to 8-5 on the year. You think that they can continue this, Chuck?
I mean, yeah, it's gonna be really difficult for them, because depth-wise, they're not super deep. But I mean, they have a lot of young talent, and if they can put it all together the way that they have been, they can be a sneaky 6th seed.
I think I'd say no. I'm kind of going to piggyback on what you said about this team not being very deep. And we're going to get more into that when we get over to the Western Conference. But as the team goes on and you hit that 60th game mark, and the starters, are tired, you're probably going to see some injuries here in, that 1 spot, the 5 spot, whatever it may be. And then I think this team kind of folds. I think they fall down. Hey, they might be able to crack that play-in, but I don't think they'll be in the top 8.
Let's move on and talk some Western Conference ball. The Sacramento Kings, they keep on rolling. They were in Dallas last night, and they blew them out, to say the least, 129-113. And Domantas Sabonis, 32 points, 13 rebounds, 6 assists. He just continues to do work.
And yeah, I mean, we look back at this trade with the Pacers. I mean, this was one of the most even trades I have ever seen, because we were just talking about Tyrese and how he's been putting up MVP numbers for the Pacers, but then now you have Domantas putting up great numbers for the Kings, and they had 62 combined between their 2 stars last night. It's a beautiful game from the Kings.
I like what you said about the trade. It kind of filled the spots that both teams needed. Looking at the Kings, I think that they're a dark horse to win it all. In terms of depth, they have the bench to do it. You have the stars to do it, DeMontis Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. Malik Monk is coming into it. They have a shooter in Keegan Murray. And I love this squad. I love watching this squad. They play fun basketball, and they beat good teams.
Kings up to 8-4 on the year. Sacramento just keeps on winning themselves. We move to the desert and a double overtime matchup. The Phoenix Suns were hosting the Utah Jazz. Phoenix, they got Devin Booker back. They haven't lost since. 140 to 137, the final score. The Suns, now they start to move up, climb the rankings in the Western Conference, Chuck.
And we're getting to finally see the Suns at full strength. I mean, we haven't seen it because of Beal's injury and then Booker. It's just been thing after thing after thing, and now they're finally full strength. And they looked really good. I mean, that's a Jazz team they probably should have blown out, but sure. The Jazz also played a phenomenal game. So I'm happy to see the Suns finally at full health.
I'll tell you, Chuck, you're right when you said they should have blown this Jazz team out. And I think it's games like this where, once again, I'm not convinced because they have zero depth when he goes to that bench. Of course, you have enough stars to keep on it at all times, but what happens when that double team comes? You know, you're throwing to that opposite corner to a guy that no one's ever heard of. You know, and when it comes down to those big shots, Kevin Durant's going to be double teamed, you know, whether or not that affects him or not.
Yeah.
All these guys can have two guys on them, so you're going to need somebody on that bench to step up and kind of, you know, carry the mantle a little bit. And I don't know if anybody on that bench does. I'm not convinced about the Phoenix Suns.
39 points for Kevin Durant last night, albeit in double overtime. And now the only team that has 10 wins in the Western Conference. We will talk the Oklahoma City Thunder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Are you kidding me? He just has looked so special so far this year to a team in Utah that should have got blown out. The Trailblazers did get blown out. 134-91. The Thunder routed Portland in Oregon.
Yeah, and the Thunder, they're showing exactly that patience works in the NBA. I mean, they made that Paul George trade. They lost all of their stars back then, and we kind of thought this is over for the Thunder. The Thunder dynasty that they were trying to build is over. But now Shai, Giddey, Chet, all these players now, they are phenomenal, and they still have draft picks for years to come.
Yeah. And I don't think the rebuild took as long as some people thought it would, right, Chuck? Because that trade that sent PG to LA, I mean, that seems, what, like 3-4 years ago at this point? And to come with all the guys that they've added, Josh Giddey, Chet, through the draft, this team is using all of their assets, and I love where they're heading as an organization, building around their star player in Shai.
Yeah, the Thunder, you mentioned the guys, they just have workers. They love to play defense, and they do so behind their leader, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who has to be in the top 5, if not top 3 of MVP considerations through about 15 games in the start of the season. Lastly, we want to look at the Western Conference standings in the NBA, and the Thunder, they're the first team in the West with 10 wins, though they're still not in the first spot. The Timberwolves have only played 12 games so far this year, so they only have 3 losses here, but 2 surprising teams atop the Western Conference, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were the 10 seed, I believe, last year, and the Thunder, who didn't even make it in at all.
I mean, yeah, these two teams, they're young, and I feel like the Timberwolves, they were due. I mean, you can't have Gobert, Cat, Edwards, and all this talent and not be a good team, but they finally actually are playing like they're supposed to play, but a first seed was definitely not what I was expecting from this team.
And I don't think they'll stay up in that one spot. I don't know if anybody does. I think they fall around that 5-6 by the time that the season's over. Anthony Edwards, the more that he plays, the better that he's going to get. And obviously you have weapons around him in Cat. So I like where they're going. They're not going to stay at 1, but they're a playoff team.
Yeah. Some hungry teams atop the Western Conference. Let's take one more break. Goodbye to Chuck. Thank you so much for your analysis today. When we come back, though, Caden and I are going to make our picks on the Monday football forecast. Back in a minute on Last Call.
There's often a moment when you're helping somebody with math where they just suddenly get over that little barrier and they get it. It's a nice aha moment, and I really like being involved in helping students achieve that moment, and we do get a lot of those here in the tutoring lab.
First time I went to Lucas Oil was last year for the 6A Center Grove versus Carroll State high school football game. And I walk in this time thinking I know what's going on, thinking I know what's going to happen. And if I were to say that Luke Sawyer lost any effect on you, just the pure vastness that it hits you when you walk in, I'd be wrong. And Jace put it perfectly. He walked in and said, wow, this is the dream. And it is, because the people that we look up to listen to a high school football game of the week on WICR HD3 UINDY Radio.
Back on Last Call, final segment here. Caden and I are going to look at our final picks here on Monday football forecast. Last week was a doozy for Caden, to say the least. He went 1-2. I went 2-1. We'll look at the standings here at the end of this segment, but right now we'll start in a special edition this week. We have 6 games to pick from because of Thanksgiving. 3 games are being played on Thursday. We'll look at all those, plus the game that's on Friday this year, the Black Friday game on Amazon Prime. So we'll start on Thursday on Thanksgiving, the 12:30 matchup, the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. Caden, who do you got?
Green Bay had a great win there last week, but this is the best team in the division by far, in the Lions, and they're playing at Detroit on Thanksgiving. This is their day. The Lions take it. Yeah,
it seems like the Lions and the Packers, I think, play on Thanksgiving every year along with the Cowboys, and it never seems like the Lions ever lose. So I also think I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions here, but for different reasons. I just think that the Packers, I don't think they're quite good enough to compete with Detroit. Well, that's a cool picture right there. Yeah, I don't think Green Bay can compete with Detroit. So this will be a fun matchup, but I ultimately think the Lions get it done by a couple scores. So let's move to 4:30. We talked about the Cowboys. They're red hot right now. They're going to host the Washington Commanders. And Caden, who do you got in this one?
Commanders and Cowboys, give me them boys. Them boys, right? They're playing in Dallas against the Washington team, which I'm not going to blow smoke at anybody here. I mean, they're not amazing. When Dallas is coming off a huge win, Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I think Dallas gets this one done as well, pretty handily. Oh, look at that picture. Yeah, that's awesome. Dallas gets this one done over Washington. Now this one, Thursday night football, on NBC. This is the San Francisco 49ers in Seattle. Caden?
San Francisco and Seattle. If we were absolutely positive that Geno Smith is going to be at the quarterback spot for this game against 49ers in Seattle, with Seattle playing the way it is right now, I'd pick Seattle. But we're not sure, so I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be safe for the first time ever and pick the San Francisco 49ers.
I also have the 49ers. They're rolling right now. Christian McCaffrey looks like he might win the NFC MVP this year. San Francisco's been red hot. They stay hot in Seattle. That does it for the Thanksgiving Day games. Now let's go to the Black Friday football, 3 o'clock Eastern time on Black Friday. The Miami Dolphins in New York for the Jets. Caden?
I've tried so hard to propel the Jets to success this season. I've tried everything that I could to get behind them and what they do. And I don't think I've jumped ship just yet, but they're playing a Miami team who has the ability to beat anybody in the league. And Miami is going to take this one as well.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat yesterday that the Jets hadn't given up a touchdown to a wideout in like 14 weeks or something, dating back to last year. But they gave up a couple yesterday to Buffalo. I think they give up a couple to Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. Miami's offense is just too powerful, so I think Miami also gets this one done. Now let's go to Sunday Night Football. We go to our first Sunday game, and it's the Baltimore Ravens in Los Angeles for the Chargers.
And I've said this about Baltimore before. I'm not convinced about what they do, even though they beat the Bengals. They beat the Bengals after Joe Burrow, died on the field. So give me the Chargers. The Chargers have everything they need to put it together. They have the weapons. Their offense can be explosive. This is a team that always plays with the greats, just never gets over that hump, and playing at home, they do this week.
I think this is going to be the first one we differ on. I think Baltimore gets the win here. The Ravens, they just look too strong. Lamar Jackson looks too good. He's been doing everything this year. And the Chargers, they just cannot get that right. They can't get the offense right this year. I think the Ravens, they get it done. The Colts, coming off of their bye last week, last time we saw them, they beat the New England Patriots in Germany 10-6. Now they're hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Caden, final pick of the day.
I don't know if you can really consider that game in Germany as a legitimate contest to base where the Colts are in terms of skill, just because you're traveling however many hours with jet lag at a time you're not usually used to playing with on a field that you've never played with before. Obviously, the Colts didn't look amazing in this one, but they're playing a not so amazing team, the Buccaneers, at home. Give me the Colts.
We're going to differ on this one as well. I'm going against the shoe for one of the first times this year. I think Tampa Bay, they're going to get it done.
Why? Why, Graham?
Just because for one, they have Baker Mayfield, and Baker's has been slinging the ball around. Baker is going to tear up this Colts defense, I think, this Sunday in Indianapolis. So we've differed on 2 of the picks out of 6. So he's got the ability to take a couple games on me, but I'm not sure there's any coming back from the records as they stand right now. Let's take a look at those right now. And Caden, 12-3 to 7-8. You're below 500.
Yeah, but I'm going to be above 500 this week, and then we have a couple more games to play. So I'm not throwing it away just yet. You pick the favorites every time, and then when you don't, you pick the picks that I pick. Hey, and I had the Cowboy hat first.
Yeah,
7-8. I'm going to be up 1 game next week, and then from there on, we're getting hot. We're getting hot at the right time. We're going to the postseason. We're taking home a ring. We're going to the Super Bowl.
I was a little jealous of Cowboy Caden. I'm not sure why, but I've matched you there with the Cowboy hat. A little bit more feathers though on mine. So, and a little bit more wins in the win column for old Graham there. So that's I don't think that one's changing though. So 12-3 to 7-8. Wow. It's going to be a fun week. Week 11 of the NFL season. Actually week 12 though. Week 12 is this week. Should be another fun week in the NFL. We'll be back next week for Last Call. Join us next Monday at 6 o'clock right here on UINDY TV on YouTube, November 27th after Thanksgiving for everything sports right here on Last Call. Have a great Thanksgiving, guys.